Nobody knows racism quite like Ron Atkinson. The man thought he was just mumbling to himself, but nope, his mic was on, and the whole world got to hear just how racist he really was. But that wasn't even the worst of it. He took things to a whole new level of insanity by calling Chinese women ugly and even asking an Irish person if they were carrying a bomb. Atkinson's history with racism isn't just one or two slip-ups. It's a full-blown pattern, almost like he couldn't help himself from saying something offensive. It started way back in 1989 when he was sacked from Atletico Madrid. After his dismissal, club president Jesus Gil dropped a bombshell, claiming that Atkinson had racially abused his own player Donato during his final game in charge against Barcelona. That accusation alone was bad enough, but looking back now, it feels like just the tip of the iceberg. Fast forward to 2004, and Atkinson found himself in a career-ending scandal, one that wasn't just controversial, but outright disgusting. While working as a pundit for ITV, he made the mistake of thinking his microphone was switched off. It wasn't. And because of that, his words, deeply racist words, were broadcast to parts of the Middle East. He was talking about Marcel Desailly, a black Chelsea player, and without hesitation he said, "He is what is known in some schools as a fucking lazy, thick nah." The UK broadcast had already ended, but thanks to his microphone still being live, the whole world got to hear exactly what was on his mind. The backlash was immediate. He resigned from ITV the very next day, knowing full well there was no coming back from that. And it didn't stop there. His job as a columnist for The Guardian, gone. He left that by mutual agreement, which, let's be honest, was probably a polite way of saying they pushed him out. Now some people rushed to defend him. One of them was Carlton Palmer, a black footballer who had played under Atkinson at Sheffield Wednesday. Palmer went on record saying, "I'm black and I'm sitting here and I'm going to stand up for Big Ron. Not because he's a friend of mine, but because I know what he's like as a bloke. If we're going to deal with racism, then let's deal with the bigger picture, not about a throwaway comment that wasn't meant in that manner." Palmer was clearly trying to argue that Atkinson's words didn't define him. But let's be real, this wasn't just a throwaway comment. It was a full sentence loaded with racism that nobody forced him to say. And if anyone thought that was the last of his racist remarks, they were sorely mistaken. Later that same year, Atkinson proved once again that he just couldn't keep his mouth shut. Speaking at Hillsborough Stadium, he cracked a joke that left people stunned. He said, "The Chinese people have the best contraception in the world. Their women are so ugly. I can't understand why there are so many of them." That wasn't just offensive, it was downright insane. Not only did he manage to insult an entire race, but he somehow tried to tie it into birth control, like he was making some weird scientific observation. But believe it or not, he still wasn't done. Nearly a decade later, in 2013, Atkinson found himself in hot water yet again, this time on Celebrity Big Brother. Sitting with Irish contestant Dr. Danielle Marr, he saw her drape her jumper over her head like a headscarf. Instead of just ignoring it, or better yet, saying literally anything else, he decided to joke, "You're not carrying a bomb with you, are you?" Once again, the reaction was swift. People were left wondering if he even thought before speaking or if this was just who he truly was. At this point, his pattern of behavior makes it impossible to defend him. One racist comment might be a slip-up, two might be a bad habit, but this was a lifetime of saying the worst things at the worst times, and yet somehow he still had people making excuses for him. But why did people defend him like crazy? Well, his career was something only a few ever had, and that made him genuinely special and respected. That's why people kept standing by him, because no matter what he said or did, his career alone was enough to earn their admiration. Atkinson's journey in football started long before he became a controversial manager and pundit. As a kid, Atkinson attended Lee Village Secondary School, where football was undoubtedly a huge part of his life. Like many aspiring footballers, he started from the bottom, working as a ground staff boy at Wolverhampton Wanderers, getting a first-hand look at the professional game while doing the kind of behind-the-scenes work that young players had to go through in those days. It was all part of the process, and Atkinson was willing to do whatever it took to make a name for himself. His real break came when he was signed by Aston Villa at the age of 17. It was an exciting moment for any young footballer, joining a big club, being part of a professional setup, and training alongside some of the best players of the time. But as promising as it seemed, his time at Villa never really took off. Despite being on the books at the club, he never made a first-team appearance. Instead of getting his big moment in claret and blue, he found himself stuck on the fringes, waiting for an opportunity that never came. Still, all wasn't lost. While his time at Aston Villa didn't lead to a playing career there, it did introduce him to a coach who would leave a lasting impact on him, Jimmy Hogan. Atkinson later credited Hogan as his biggest influence in football, shaping the way he thought about the game and ultimately the way he would go on to manage when his playing days were over. In the summer of 1959, Atkinson's career took a new turn when he was transferred to Headington United. At the time, it wasn't exactly the most glamorous move, but the club itself was on the rise. A year later, Headington United rebranded itself as Oxford United, and Atkinson found himself right in the thick of things during one of the most exciting periods in the club's history. Even better, he got to play alongside his younger brother Graham, making it a true family affair. Atkinson quickly established himself as a key player for Oxford, playing as a wing half and earning the nickname The Tank, a nod to his strength, presence, and ability to command the pitch. Over the years, he became a club legend, making over 500 appearances in all competitions and even managing to score 14 goals along the way. Wearing the captain's armband, Atkinson played a massive role in Oxford United's rapid rise through the English football pyramid. In just 6 years, from 1962 to 1968, he led the club from the Southern League all the way up to the second division, a remarkable achievement at the time. To put it into perspective, this was a club that had started as a non-league side, and under Atkinson's captaincy, they climbed 3 divisions in a short space of time. In fact, he holds a unique place in football history as the first ever player to captain a club from the Southern League through 3 divisions of the Football League. By the time Oxford United settled into the second division, Atkinson had already cemented his legacy at the club. He spent 3 full seasons playing at that level, helping Oxford compete against some of the biggest names in English football. Though he never played at the top level himself, his leadership and experience paved the way for the club's growth, and his time there would later influence the way he approached football as a manager. After retiring from playing, Atkinson wasted no time in stepping into management. He got his first real shot in 1971 when he took over as player-manager at non-league Kettering Town at just 32 years old. Managing a club while still playing is no easy task, but Atkinson thrived in the role, proving that he had the leadership and tactical mind to guide a team from the touchline. His time at Kettering was a success, and it didn't take long before bigger clubs started to take notice of his work. In November 1974, Atkinson got his first opportunity in the Football League when he was appointed as manager of Cambridge United. At the time, Cambridge were playing in the 4th division, but Atkinson had a vision and he wasted no time in turning things around. His management style, bold, confident and attacking, breathed new life into the club. Under his leadership, Cambridge went from being just another lower league side to serious contenders. The real breakthrough came in 1977 when Atkinson led Cambridge to the 4th division title, securing promotion in impressive fashion. His influence on the team was clear, and by the time he left in 1978, Cambridge United were on the brink of another promotion, this time to the 2nd division. Though he wasn't there to see it through, his assistant, John Docherty, took over and finished the job, guiding Cambridge into the 2nd division later that season. But by then, Atkinson had already moved on to an even bigger challenge, managing in the 1st division. In January 1978, Atkinson landed one of the biggest jobs of his career when he was appointed as the manager of West Bromwich Albion. This was his first experience at the top level of English football, and he made an immediate impact. One of his most significant early moves was signing Brendan Batson from his former club, Cambridge United. But Batson wasn't just any signing, he was about to become part of something historic. Atkinson built a team that not only played exciting, attacking football, but also broke barriers. Alongside Batson, he had 2 other incredibly talented black players, Laurie Cunningham and Cyril Regis. At the time, English football was still struggling with deep-rooted racism, and seeing 3 black players regularly starting for a top-flight team was unheard of. These three would go on to be known as the 3 Degrees, and their success at West Brom helped pave the way for future generations of black footballers in England. On the pitch, Atkinson's West Bromwich Albion side were fearless. They played with confidence, took on the best teams in the country, and often came out on top. The 1978-79 season was a special one for the club, as they finished third in the First Division, a remarkable achievement for a team that wasn't traditionally one of the league's powerhouses. Their European campaign was equally impressive as they reached the quarter-finals of the UEFA Cup, proving that they could compete on the continental stage as well. Perhaps the most memorable moment of that season came on December 30th, 1978, when Atkinson's team pulled off one of the greatest victories in their history. A thrilling 5-3 win over Manchester United at Old Trafford. It wasn't just the result that was impressive, but the way they played. They went toe-to-toe with one of the biggest clubs in English football and put on a show, attacking with pace, flair and confidence. At one point that season, West Brom were even sitting second in the league, only behind Liverpool on goal difference. Atkinson stayed with West Brom until 1981, and in that time he established himself as one of the most exciting young managers in English football. His team continued to perform well, finishing fourth in the 1980-81 season, and by then it was clear that he was destined for even bigger things. Sure enough, shortly after that season ended, Atkinson got the call that would change his life. Manchester United had just sacked their manager, Dave Sexton, and they needed someone who could bring success back to Old Trafford. Atkinson, with his attacking philosophy and larger-than-life personality, was the man they wanted, and just like that, he was on his way to managing one of the biggest clubs in the world. When Atkinson took over as Manchester United manager in 1981, the club was struggling to find its way back to the top. They had finished 8th in the league the previous season, and fans were desperate for a return to the glory days. Atkinson was coming in with a big reputation after his success with West Bromwich Albion, and he was determined to shake things up. One of his first big moves as United boss was breaking the British transfer record to bring in Brian Robson from his former club, West Brom. The transfer fee of £1.5 million was unheard of at the time, but Atkinson had no doubts. He saw Robson as the player who could lead United back to the top. Along with Robson, he also brought in Remy Moses, another talented midfielder from West Brom, and striker Frank Stapleton from Arsenal. Atkinson wanted to build a team that could play attacking, entertaining football, and he wasted no time in assembling the pieces. His first season in charge, 1981-82, was a solid one. United finished third in the league, which meant they qualified for the UEFA Cup, something they had missed out on the previous year. For much of the season, they were serious title contenders, often sitting at the top of the table, but a late charge from Liverpool saw Bob Paisley's side pull away and claim the title once again. Still, there was a sense that United were on the rise, and with the squad Atkinson was building, there was plenty of optimism around Old Trafford. The following season, 1982-83, was when United really started making their presence felt. Atkinson's team reached 2 major finals, making 2 trips to Wembley, and ended the season by winning the FA Cup. In the league, they finished third again, proving they were becoming a consistent force. For much of the season, they had been in the title race, but once again, Liverpool proved too strong, putting together an incredible run of form after Christmas to leave everyone else trailing behind. One of the biggest positives from that season was the emergence of Norman Whiteside. The young forward had been highly rated within the club, and 1982-83 was the year he truly announced himself to the world. Whiteside was only 17 years old, but he played with the confidence of someone much older. He was a key player in United's FA Cup success, scoring in the final against Brighton. The first game had ended in a 2-2 draw, forcing a replay, and in that second match, United ran riot, winning 4-0 to lift the trophy. It was a moment of triumph for Atkinson and his squad, proof that they could win on the big stage. The 1983-84 season brought more highs and lows. In Europe, United made an impressive run in the Cup Winners' Cup, reaching the semi-finals before being knocked out. However, Their FA Cup defence ended in disaster as they were stunned by third division side AFC Bournemouth in the third round, a shocking 2-0 defeat that left fans disappointed. In the league, they once again showed promise, topping the table at various points in the season, but injuries to key players took their toll. By the end of the campaign, they had slipped down to fourth place. One of the biggest changes that summer was the sale of Ray Wilkins to AC Milan for £1.5 million. Rather than spend big on a replacement, Atkinson made a bold tactical move. He pushed Whiteside into midfield, allowing the young striker Mark Hughes to form a partnership up front with Frank Stapleton. Hughes had come through United's youth system and was beginning to establish himself as a real talent, so this was a move that made sense. The 1984-85 season saw another FA Cup triumph. United fought their way to Wembley once again and won the trophy, securing more silverware under Atkinson. However, they were denied the chance to compete in Europe the following season because of the Heysel disaster, which led to English clubs being banned from European competitions. It was a major blow as United had been hoping to make an impact on the continental stage. Then came the 1985-86 season, which started with an absolute bang. United won their first 10 league games and remained unbeaten for their first 15 matches, building a commanding lead at the top of the table. Atkinson's team looked unstoppable, and for a while it seemed like they were finally going to win the league. But after the new year, things took a turn for the worse. Their form collapsed, and they started dropping points. By the end of the season, they had fallen all the way to fourth place, with Liverpool once again finishing as champions. Injuries played a huge part in United's downfall, especially to their captain Brian Robson, who missed a large chunk of the season. To make matters worse, English clubs were still banned from Europe, so there was no UEFA Cup place as a consolation. The disappointment continued into the summer when it was announced that Mark Hughes was being sold to Barcelona. Hughes had become a key player for United, and his departure was a huge loss. Atkinson had seen this coming and had already brought in Peter Davenport from Nottingham Forest as a replacement, but Davenport struggled to make the same impact as Hughes. By the start of the 1986-87 season, pressure was mounting on Atkinson. Despite his 2 FA Cup wins and 5 straight top 4 finishes, expectations at Manchester United were sky high. Fans wanted a league title, and the club's board was starting to lose patience. There had been rumours that Atkinson could be replaced, with names like Aberdeen's Alex Ferguson and Barcelona's Terry Venables being linked to the job. But as the new season kicked off, Atkinson was still in charge, hoping to turn things around. Unfortunately, things went from bad to worse. United started the season in dreadful form, losing their first 3 league games. There was a brief improvement in September and October, including a 5-1 win over Southampton that gave fans some hope, but the overall performances were still below expectations. The final straw came on the 4th of November, 1986, when United suffered a humiliating 4-1 defeat to Southampton in the League Cup. 2 days later, Atkinson was sacked. At the time of his dismissal, United were sitting in the bottom 4 of the First Division, far from where they were expected to be. It was a disappointing end to what had once seemed like such a promising tenure. Just days after his departure, Manchester United made their next move, hiring a Scottish manager named Alex Ferguson. Little did anyone know that decision would change the club's history forever. After leaving Manchester United, Atkinson wasn't out of the game for long. In the autumn of 1987, he made a return to West Bromwich Albion, the club where he had enjoyed so much success a decade earlier. But things had changed drastically since his last time in charge. West Brom were no longer the strong First Division side he had left behind. Instead, they had slipped down to the Second Division and were in real danger of falling even further. With relegation to the Third Division looming, it was a dire situation, but Atkinson wasn't the type to shy away from a challenge. He took on the task of keeping Albion up, and after a tough battle, they managed to survive, finishing the 1987-88 season in 20th place, just enough to stay in the division. With the immediate crisis averted, Atkinson set about rebuilding the team. The following season, 1988-89, started much more positively. Albion looked like a completely different side, playing with confidence and pushing for promotion back to the top flight. Fans started to believe that Big Ron was about to pull off another one of his famous turnarounds. But then, just as things were looking promising, a new opportunity came knocking, and this one was a little different. When Atkinson had left Manchester United in 1986, he had been in talks to take over as manager of Atletico Madrid, one of Spain's biggest clubs. It was an exciting prospect, and he had been ready to take the job. However, internal politics at Atletico caused delays, and while he waited for the situation to be resolved, he had taken the West Brom job in the meantime. Now, in October 1988, Atletico Madrid finally came calling again, and this time the move went through. Atkinson arrived in Spain full of enthusiasm, ready to take on the challenge of managing in La Liga, and he got off to a dream start. His first game in charge was a stunning 6-1 victory over Espanyol. It was exactly the kind of beginning he had hoped for, and Atletico's fans were excited about what was to come under their new English manager. But Atkinson quickly discovered that managing Atletico Madrid was not like managing an English club. The club's owner, Jesus Gil, was one of the most unpredictable and controversial figures in Spanish football. He was known for his fiery temper and had a reputation for sacking managers at the drop of a hat. Despite Atletico performing fairly well in the league, tensions between Atkinson and Gil began to grow. The two men had completely different approaches, and it wasn't long before their personalities clashed. Just 3 months after taking over, Atkinson was sacked. It was a shock, but given Gil's history of constantly firing managers, it probably shouldn't have been a surprise. What made things even worse for Atkinson was that his assistant from his West Brom days, Colin Addison, was chosen to replace him. Atkinson felt completely betrayed. He went on record in the English media saying Addison had stabbed him in the back. The fallout from that situation was so bad that the two men never worked together again. Back in England, Atkinson didn't have to wait too long for his next job. In February 1989, he was appointed as the new manager of Sheffield Wednesday. At the time, Wednesday were battling to stay in the First Division, but despite Atkinson's best efforts, they were relegated in May 1990 after a crushing 3-0 home defeat to Nottingham Forest. It was a huge disappointment for the club and its fans, but if there was one thing Atkinson had proven throughout his career, it was that he knew how to bounce back. And bounce back he did. Instead of sulking about the relegation, Atkinson got straight to work rebuilding the squad. He made some smart signings, changed the team's playing style, and inspired confidence in his players. The hard work paid off in spectacular fashion. In the 1999-91 season, Sheffield Wednesday stormed through the second division, winning promotion straight back to the top flight at the first attempt, but that wasn't even the best part of the season. The real highlight came in the League Cup final. Atkinson's Sheffield Wednesday faced none other than Manchester United, his old club, at Wembley. Many expected United, now managed by Alex Ferguson, to come out on top. But Atkinson had other ideas. His Wednesday side pulled off a shock victory, winning 1-0 thanks to a goal from John Sheridan. It was an incredible moment for the club, marking their first major trophy in over half a century. Atkinson had once again shown that he had the magic touch when it came to lifting silverware. With Wednesday back in the First Division and fresh off a cup triumph, things were looking bright for the club. Atkinson was a hero in Sheffield, and fans were excited about what he could achieve next. He even reassured supporters that he was committed to staying at the club, stating on 31st May 1991 that he had no plans to leave. But then, just a week later, he was gone. Atkinson had been offered the chance to become manager of Aston Villa, and he couldn't resist. It was a move that left many Sheffield Wednesday fans feeling betrayed. They had believed in him, trusted him, and celebrated with him, only to see him walk away just as things were getting exciting. His decision to leave sparked a lot of anger among Wednesday supporters who felt he had gone back on his word. When Atkinson took over as manager of Aston Villa in 1991, he was stepping into a club with a rich history but a team that needed serious work. Villa had just parted ways with Josef Venglos after a disappointing season, and the fans were desperate for someone to bring the goodness back. And right from the start, he proved he was up for the challenge. In the very first season of the newly formed FA Premier League in 1992-93, Atkinson's Villa side exceeded all expectations. They played thrilling, attacking football led by the likes of Dean Saunders, Dalian Atkinson and Paul McGrath, and pushed Manchester United all the way in the title race. In the end, they finished second, an incredible achievement considering the competition. As of 2021, that second-place finish still remains the highest ever achieved by an English manager in the Premier League, a record later equalled by Kevin Keegan in 1995-96 with Newcastle United. But Atkinson wasn't done yet. The following season, he led Villa to another triumph, the 1994 League Cup. Villa defeated Manchester United 3-1 at Wembley, giving the club their first major trophy since their legendary European Cup win in 1982. It was a massive moment for the team and the fans, and Atkinson had officially restored Villa's reputation as a force to be reckoned with. These successes even secured Villa a place in European competition, though their UEFA Cup campaigns were unfortunately short-lived. Despite these achievements, there was tension brewing behind the scenes. Atkinson and Villa chairman Doug Ellis never saw eye to eye, and their working relationship became increasingly strained. By 1992, the two men already had a mutual dislike for each other, and it only got worse as time went on. The tension reached a breaking point in November 1994 after Villa suffered a 4-3 defeat against Wimbledon. Just 3 days earlier, Ellis had publicly backed Atkinson, telling the media that he was one of England's top 3 football managers. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. On the 10th of November, 1994, Atkinson was sacked. It was a move that shocked some, but felt inevitable to those who had witnessed the ongoing power struggle between the manager and the chairman. By this stage, the once dominant Villa side that had come so close to winning the league just 18 months earlier was now struggling near the bottom of the table. Many of their key players were aging, and fresh blood was needed. Atkinson was replaced by Brian Little, who set about overhauling the squad and ensuring that Villa remained in the Premier League. Atkinson, however, didn't stay unemployed for long. Just 3 months after his departure from Villa, he was back in the Premier League, this time as the manager of Coventry City. The way he got the job wasn't without controversy. Phil Neal, the previous manager, was fired in a manner that many felt was engineered specifically to make way for Atkinson. The Sky Blues were hovering dangerously close to the relegation zone when Atkinson took charge in mid-February 1995, but he quickly made his presence felt. Under his leadership, Coventry put together some impressive performances. They pulled off a thrilling 4-2 win against local rivals Leicester City, stunned Liverpool with a 3-2 victory at Anfield, and held their own against a Blackburn Rovers team that would go on to win the league that season. By March, Coventry's survival in the Premier League was looking increasingly certain, and Atkinson was even named Premier League Manager of the Month. One of the standout results came in the penultimate game of the season, when the Sky Blues travelled to North London and defeated Tottenham Hotspur 3-1. Eventually, they finished in 16th place, securing their top-flight status for another year. The following season, Atkinson continued to make his mark, guiding Coventry to some memorable results. One of the most famous moments of his tenure came in December 1995, when Coventry hammered defending champions Blackburn Rovers 5-0 at Highfield Road. It was one of the club's biggest wins of the decade. Atkinson also made some big-name signings, bringing in experienced players like Gordon Strachan, Noel Whelan, and Gary McAllister. However, not all of his transfers were entirely his decision. In his autobiography, Atkinson admitted that he wasn't fully on board with signing McAllister. It was actually Strachan's idea. Despite these signings, Coventry continued to struggle in the Premier League. By November 1996, it became clear that a change was needed. Rather than being sacked, Atkinson agreed to move upstairs into a director of football role, handing over the managerial duties to Gordon Strachan, who had by then retired from playing and had been serving as Atkinson's assistant. Atkinson's time at Coventry was over, but his managerial career wasn't. Just a year later, in November 1997, he was back in the dugout, this time returning to Sheffield Wednesday. The Owls had made a dreadful start to the 1997-98 season under David Pleat, suffering humiliating defeats like a 7-2 loss against Blackburn Rovers and a 6-1 thrashing at the hands of Manchester United. Something had to change, and the club turned to Atkinson in the hope that he could steady the ship, and he did exactly that. Wednesday's form improved almost immediately after his arrival, and they climbed well clear of the relegation zone. But despite his success in rescuing the club from a potentially disastrous season, he wasn't offered a permanent contract. When the campaign ended, so did Atkinson's time at Hillsborough. Then came his final managerial job, a brief and largely forgettable spell at Nottingham Forest. Atkinson took charge of Forest in January 1999, with the club already staring relegation in the face. His time at the City Ground got off to an embarrassing start. At his very first home game against Arsenal, he accidentally walked into the wrong dugout. It was an awkward moment that set the tone for what was to come. Forest's season went from bad to worse, and their fate was sealed on 24th April 1999 when a 2-0 defeat to Aston Villa confirmed their relegation. In what was supposed to be a moment of humility after such a disastrous result, Atkinson instead made things worse by describing an 8-1 defeat to Manchester United as a 9-goal thriller. Needless to say, Forest fans weren't impressed. Realising that his time in football management had come to an end, Atkinson announced that he would be stepping down at the end of the season and retiring from coaching altogether. On the 16th of May, 1999, he officially called time on his long and eventful managerial career. After stepping away from management, Atkinson found a new role in the world of football broadcasting, and it was one that suited him perfectly. Atkinson's broadcasting career was solidified as he became a regular part of ITV's coverage of live matches. Whether he was in the studio offering his insights or working alongside commentators as the football insider, he had his unique style of breaking down the action in a way that was engaging and entertaining for viewers. His chemistry with commentators like Brian Moore and Clive Tildesley helped shape ITV's Champions League broadcasts during the 1990s and early 2000s. His distinctive voice and colourful commentary became the soundtrack for many memorable nights of European football, and fans quickly grew accustomed to his insights into the game. In addition to his Champions League work, Atkinson was also involved in ITV's coverage of the European Championships and the World Cup. As the main co-commentator during these prestigious tournaments, he was on hand to offer his expert analysis during some of the most thrilling international football matches. But Atkinson's media career didn't just stay in the world of commentary and punditry. He also took on a more personal role when he fronted a show called Extra Time with Ron Atkinson. Airing on Central Television, the show saw Atkinson sitting down for one-on-one interviews with some of the biggest names in football. It was a chance for fans to hear directly from personalities like Kevin Keegan, Terry Venables, and Martin O'Neill. The late 2000s and early 2010s also saw Atkinson continue to stay in the public eye, though not always in the world of sport. In 2013, he took a somewhat unexpected turn by becoming a housemate on the 12th series of Celebrity Big Brother. This was a big move for Atkinson, as it took him outside his usual realm of football and broadcasting. The show was filled with colourful characters, and Atkinson, with his trademark charisma, fit right in. However, his time in the Big Brother house was relatively short. On day 9, he was evicted from the house after receiving the fewest votes to save him, competing against a group of other well-known celebrities. And that's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. We'll see you all soon. Take care and bye for now. It's the game of the world, the most watched sport globally, but it took a Chinese-English player to show the world that the most famous league in the world represented global players too. They said he was too short, they said he didn't belong, but Sammy Lee proved them all wrong. This is the story of how a 5'4" Chinese-English player became a legend in the Premier League. But before we jump into the story of Sammy Lee, for more videos on the icons of football, be sure to like and subscribe. Football isn't just a mere game, it is a way of life. Sammy Lee was a player from a diverse background, one not usually seen in football. Born into a British-Chinese family, he had all the markings of a die-hard fanatic of the game, but he would be the first from his community to make it as far as he did. Go to any continent in the world and you will find die-hard fans of the sport willing to shed their blood for the game. But leagues such as the Premier League remained insular. The players all came from a narrow set of backgrounds. This, however, was set to change in the 70s, and Sammy Lee would be at the forefront. However, considering the massive success of football on the global stage, it was only a matter of time before this taboo broke. At this stage, enter Sammy Lee, of English-Chinese descent. Sammy Lee would make a name for himself, despite his simple frame of 5'4", and make his mark on the game. And his way of going about it was simple, that of pure grit and determination. Now, we aren't talking about basketball, where height is the make-all-be-all for players. Plenty of players with less than ideal heights have reached success in football, but it's undeniable that height is an added benefit in a game requiring as much physical strength as football. Sammy would find it difficult when it came to him to make headers or to simply tower over the opposing team. He simply did not have the height advantage that many others around him did and would have to work twice or thrice as hard as a result. He knew he was up against, and he knew the only way to counteract this was to be better than the others. Hard work and determination was the only separator that could take him ahead, and Sammy Lee knew this fully. Wherever hard work goes into play, it does not go unnoticed. From the players, to the fans, to the coaches, they all notice. For Sammy Lee, it was not different. Soon he would be under the watchful eyes of the management of the Liverpool FC. This was the club that has given him his love of football, and now it was coming to him to induct him into its roster. It must have felt like homecoming for a player who had just started his career. Sammy Lee would join the Liverpool lineup, and it is here that he would make the most impact of his sporting career. His long stint with Liverpool FC in the 70s and 80s would leave him an icon of the club and one of the most fondly remembered members of their lineup in the era. Sammy Lee's journey through football is nothing short of remarkable, a story of passion, loyalty and resilience. This is shown simply in the way he would make up for his height. Footballers are usually expected to be taller than the average person in order to achieve a height advantage. Sammy Lee did not have this benefit, but he made do with what he was genetically gifted with and made his hard work do the rest of the work for him. Considering all of this, it is very surprising how little involvement there has been of the other communities that reside in Britain in football despite its popularity. Leagues like the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga and League One are first and foremost national leagues, given that it is a given that local populations would take precedence in them, but despite this, it is undeniable that players such as Sammy Lee were there to take the game forward. No one knows this better than the British, whose legacy is one of spreading the game throughout their former empire. Born on February 7, 1959 in Liverpool, Lee grew up in a city where football was more than just a sport. It was a way of life. From an early age, he was immersed in the vibrant culture of Liverpool Football Club, a club that would later define his career and legacy. Football was a way of life in Liverpool, and Liverpool FC was the club that guided this way of life. The entire town would come together for the club, and Sammy was no different, as the Cube would be responsible for much of the early fascination with football, and in his later life would come to define his love for the game as well. Fast forward to 1976, and Lee made his debut for Liverpool in unforgettable fashion. Scoring a goal in front of the iconic Kop as a young player living out his dream was the stuff of fairy tales. It really did seem like a tale too good to be true. A player of their own city, who had been brought up in the very city of Liverpool, making a debut for the club. A debut where he scored a goal and was now leading the very club which had been so instrumental in his development as a player. Sammy Lee quickly established himself as a key midfielder during Liverpool's golden era, becoming an integral part of one of the most successful teams in football history. Over the next decade, Lee helped Liverpool secure an astonishing 10 major trophies, including 3 consecutive league titles and 2 European Cups. This was in one of the prime periods of the history of Liverpool. It was during these years that the club seemed unfabulous to anyone in the league. The Premier was one of the toughest legumes in Europe. Almost every club had an N-equal shot at the league. Yet despite this, many would falter because they couldn't break the one simple thing was demanded of a club: consistency. With Sammy Lee, they had this consistency. Year after year, Liverpool was able to maintain this legacy of its where even if this performance wobbled, it would come back stronger. His contributions were vital during the club's most dominant years, particularly during the 1983-84 season, when Liverpool claimed their 4th European Cup. Time after time, the club established itself as an entity that was amongst the most successful in Britain, and with this success was Sammy Lee. That season, Lee played every game, showcasing his skill, determination, and unwavering commitment to the team. Lee's time at Liverpool wasn't just about winning trophies, it was about being part of something extraordinary. Sharing the pitch with legends like Kenny Dalglish and Ian Rush created unforgettable memories and fostered camaraderie that extended beyond the field. This era is remembered as the golden days of Liverpool, a club at their peak which would be remembered by the generations past of the club. However, by the mid-1980s, injuries began to take their toll on Lee's career. Despite his struggles, he remained devoted to the club he loved until 1986 when he made the difficult decision to leave Liverpool for Queen's Park Rangers. His journey didn't end there. He went on to play for Osasuna in Spain before returning to England for stints with Southampton and Bolton Wanderers. No player can last on the field forever, and Sammy Lee knew that his time was at an end. The writing was on the wall, but his love for football would not end here. He knew that he still had much left to give to the game. Here would begin the coaching career of Sammy Lee. He would return anew to the field, but this time as the one who would guide the players. This career would see him going back to the club that had made his name, the club in whose hallowed halls he is still remembered fondly, and where he is seen as a sign of the golden era of the club. This was the return of Sammy Lee to the hallowed halls of Anfield. Sammy Lee would make a return to Liverpool, but this not as a player, but as a teacher for the younger generations, to inspire them, to build up the new generation of the club who could take his place. These players would take the mantle and lead the club anew. When Lee's playing days came to an end, his passion for football remained as strong as ever. He seamlessly transitioned into coaching, returning to Liverpool to begin this new chapter of his career. Over time, he worked under some of football's most respected managers, including Sven-Göran Eriksson and Rafael Benitez. Each role deepened his understanding of the game and allowed him to develop a unique coaching style that combined tactical knowledge with empathy for players. Lee became known for his ability to nurture young talent and inspire those around him with his infectious enthusiasm. Lee's love for the club was genuine, and his history with not only the club but the city meant that whatever he said came from a place of genuine understanding and love. Being able to bring their childhood club to its peak is a dream few can fulfill, yet being able to do it all over again now, in the form of a coach, is a chance that little few have gotten. Sammy Lee would be the rare individual who gets to experience both of these. Lee initially served as the reserve team manager at Liverpool, where he honed his skills and gained valuable experience. His dedication and understanding of the game earned him respect within the club, leading to promotions under subsequent managers like Roy Evans and Gerard Houllier. He became an integral part of the coaching staff, contributing to Liverpool's success during a transformative period for the club. In 2001, Lee expanded his horizons by joining Sven-Göran Eriksson's England coaching setup. This role allowed him to work with some of the best talents in English football and further develop his coaching philosophy. He balanced this position with his responsibilities at Liverpool until he transitioned to a full-time role with the national team in 2004. Lee's managerial journey took a significant turn in 2005 when he became assistant manager to Sam Allardyce at Bolton Wanderers. His time at Bolton was marked by a promotion to head coach in 2007, although his tenure was short-lived. He returned to Liverpool in 2008 as an assistant manager under Rafael Benitez, where he played a crucial role in the club's strategies and player development. After leaving Liverpool in 2011, Lee continued to build his coaching resume. He took on various roles, including assistant coach at Southampton under Ronald Koeman in 2014. His ability to adapt and thrive in different environments showcased his versatility as a coach. Throughout his coaching journey, Lee demonstrated that football is not just about tactics, but also about relationships. He built strong bonds with players and staff alike, leaving a lasting impact wherever he went. His experience as both a player and coach enriched his perspective on the game and solidified his reputation as one of football's great minds. Even today, Sammy Lee remains deeply connected to Liverpool FC as a loyal supporter and ambassador for the club. Reflecting on his journey, he often speaks with heartfelt gratitude about what Liverpool means to him. His story is not just about personal achievements, but also about loyalty to the sport he loves and the community that shaped him. Sammy Lee's legacy goes beyond statistics. It is a testament to living one's dream while giving back to something bigger than oneself. As we look back on Sammy Lee's life and career, we see more than just trophies and accolades. We see a man who embodied the spirit of football at its finest. From his early days as a young boy, watching matches at Anfield, to becoming a key figure in Liverpool's history and beyond, Sammy Lee's story continues to inspire future generations of players and fans alike. His undeniable mark on football will forever be remembered every time fans sing at Anfield or celebrate the beautiful game he dedicated his life to. For more videos on the icons of football, be sure to like and subscribe.
GordonBanks was anything but an ordinary player. He was the man who lost an eye and still outshone everyone on the field. Not only did he become England's #1 when it mattered most, but he also proved himself as the best goalkeeper in the world. A legend like no other, he didn't just overcome the odds, he redefined greatness. In October 1972, Banks's life changed forever when a car accident took away the sight in his right eye. For most players, that would have been the end of their career, but not for Banks. He wasn't the kind of man to back down from a challenge. Losing an eye was just another obstacle to overcome. And if there was one thing Banks did best, it was defying the odds. But this wasn't the only battle he had to fight. Years later, he was diagnosed with kidney cancer, a struggle that sadly led to his passing in 2019. Yet, despite everything life threw at him, his name had already been written into football history. The loss of his eye never stopped him from succeeding. Instead, it became part of the story that made him even greater. Banks wasn't just any goalkeeper, he was the goalkeeper. He was England's #1 when they lifted their first and only World Cup trophy in 1966. That moment alone was enough to make him a legend. But Banks didn't just ride on the glory of that victory, he was an essential part of it. England's triumph wasn't just about great attacking play, it was built on the solid foundation of Banks's presence between the posts. He was calm, reliable, and impossible to break down. And it wasn't just England that recognised his greatness. Around the world, Banks was widely regarded as the best goalkeeper of his time. This wasn't just media hype, it was backed by his performances, his countless accolades, and, most importantly, the respect he commanded from fellow players. He wasn't just good, he was consistently world-class. But even when you're at the top, people will always have questions. In 1967, after winning the World Cup, Banks made a surprising decision. He left Leicester City for Stoke City. Many eyebrows were raised. Stoke were a solid club, no doubt, but they weren't at the same level as the biggest teams in England at the time, clubs like Liverpool, Manchester United, or even Leicester themselves. For a goalkeeper of his calibre, some wondered if he was settling for less. Was it the right move? Did it show a lack of ambition? But Banks never played for status. He played for the love of the game. He didn't need the biggest club to prove he was the best. No matter where he played, he was the best. His performances for Stoke, just like everywhere else, spoke louder than any doubts people had about his decision. He kept proving himself over and over again, not just as England's hero, but as one of football's greatest goalkeepers of all time. From his early days, he faced many challenges, especially with injuries, but he always battled through like a true champion. His journey to becoming one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time didn't start with instant success. In fact, it was full of challenges, setbacks, and moments that tested his resilience. But if there was one thing about Banks, it was that he never backed down. Back in 1953, Chesterfield scouted him while he was playing for Millspaw and offered him a 6-game trial with the youth team. He did well enough to earn a part-time contract for £3 a week. At first, things weren't exactly glamorous. His reserve team was placed in the Central League, not because they were good, but because a powerful club director pulled some strings. The result? A miserable season where Banks conceded 122 goals. It would have been enough to break most young goalkeepers, but not him. During his national service, Banks was stationed in Germany with the Royal Signals and even won the Rhine Cup with his regimental team. That experience toughened him up, and after recovering from a fractured elbow, he helped Chesterfield's youth team reach the FA Youth Cup final in 1956. They lost 4-3 on aggregate to Manchester United's legendary Busby Babes, a team featuring future stars like Bobby Charlton. Banks finally got his big break in 1958 when manager Doug Livingstone handed him his first team debut against Colchester United. The game ended in a 2-2 draw, but Banks held on to the starting spot, missing just 3 games due to injury that season. The catch? There was no goalkeeping coach to guide him, so Banks had to learn everything the hard way by making mistakes and figuring out how to fix them. He quickly developed into a commanding presence, shouting instructions and organising the defence in front of him. Then came the unexpected twist. Leicester City, a First Division club, bought him for £7,000 in 1959. Banks, with barely 23 league appearances under his belt, was suddenly competing against 5 other goalkeepers, including experienced Scotland international final, Johnny Anderson. He started the season in the reserves, but after an injury to Dave McLaren, Banks got his chance. His debut was a 1-1 draw against Blackpool, and though he was briefly sent back to the reserves, Leicester's first-choice keepers struggled, and Banks reclaimed his spot. He made sure he wasn't giving it up again. He worked tirelessly to improve, putting in extra hours in training, something rare in an era with no specialised goalkeeping coaches. By the following season, both Anderson and McLaren had left the club, making Banks the undisputed number one. Leicester finished 6th in 1961 and reached the FA Cup final against Tottenham, who had already won the league. Unfortunately, Leicester were forced to play with an injured right-back for most of the game and never really stood a chance, losing 2-0. The next season was disappointing, but Banks had his first taste of European football in the Cup Winners' Cup. Torn between playing for England or Leicester, he chose both, rushing from one game to another. But despite his best efforts, Leicester were knocked out by Atletico Madrid. In 1963, Leicester looked like they could win both the league and FA Cup. Banks put in one of his finest performances in the FA Cup semi-final, keeping a clean sheet despite Liverpool dominating the game. But then disaster struck. He broke his finger and missed the final few league games, and Leicester collapsed to 4th place. To make matters worse, they lost the FA Cup final 3-1 to Manchester United. Though the league form was inconsistent, Leicester found success in the League Cup, beating Stoke City in the final in 1964. Banks, however, was growing frustrated. Despite being a top goalkeeper, he was paid only £40 a week, and the club refused to give him a substantial raise. This led to unrest among the squad, and key players started leaving. By 1966, Leicester were struggling, and despite Banks winning the World Cup with England that summer, Leicester shockingly decided to replace him with a young Peter Shilton. Banks was told bluntly that his best days were behind him, and he was put on the transfer list. Many top clubs hesitated to spend big money on a goalkeeper, but Stoke City saw his value. Leicester refused to pay him a loyalty bonus, and Banks only agreed to the move after Stoke seemingly negotiated a payment. Years later, he discovered that Leicester never paid him a penny. Stoke had covered the amount. At Stoke, Banks found a team of experienced veterans who still had plenty to prove. In his early years, the club struggled, but by 1970, they were becoming competitive. Banks remained a rock at the back, making incredible saves, including one where he caught a powerful header from Wyn Davies and another where he stopped a close-range volley from Alan Gilzean. Stoke came close to an FA Cup final in both 1971 and 1972, but were heartbreakingly eliminated by Arsenal each time. In 1972, a controversial penalty and an offside goal denied them a place in the final. Banks admitted years later that he still felt cheated out of that chance. But then came a moment of glory. Stoke's 1972 League Cup win. After a dramatic semi-final win against West Ham, they faced Chelsea in the final. Banks played a crucial role, and Stoke won 2-1, securing the club's first major trophy. His incredible performances earned him the FWA Footballer of the Year award, making him the first goalkeeper to win it since Bert Trautmann in 1956. Then, in 1972, disaster struck. Driving home from a physio session, Banks was involved in a serious car accident. He suffered horrific injuries to his face and lost sight in his right eye. Doctors gave him a 50-50 chance of saving his vision, but the damage was irreversible. Without depth perception, playing professionally was impossible, and he was forced to retire in 1973. But Banks wasn't done with football. In 1977, he made a surprise comeback, playing in the North American Soccer League for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. At 39 years old and with one working eye, he was still so good that he was named NASL Goalkeeper of the Year. He also had a brief spell in Ireland, playing one game for St Patrick's Athletic and keeping a clean sheet. Banks finally retired from playing in 1978, but his legacy was already secured. His journey from a young goalkeeper conceding 122 goals in a season to becoming a World Cup winner, League Cup champion, and one of the best shot stoppers football has ever seen was nothing short of extraordinary. He faced rejection, financial struggles, career-threatening injuries, and even blindness. But he never stopped fighting, and that's why he remains one of the most inspiring figures in football history. And that wraps up today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an update. Who says you need to be tall to dominate in football? Just look at BillyBremner. Despite his shorter height, he played with such incredible skill and determination that he outshined even the biggest players on the field. His talent and leadership didn't just earn him respect, it made him one of the best in the game. In the end, he didn't just play for Leeds United, he led them as their captain, proving that ability matters way more than height. Bremner wasn't the tallest or the strongest player on the pitch, but you'd never know it by the way he played. He had a toughness about him that made him seem unstoppable. Whether it was a towering defender or a quick forward, it didn't matter. Bremner went in for every tackle like he had nothing to lose. His aggressive, no-nonsense style made him one of the hardest players to go up against, and he quickly earned a reputation as a relentless competitor. Of course, playing with that kind of intensity came with its fair share of drama. Bremner was never one to back down from a fight, and that led to plenty of on-field clashes. He wasn't afraid to stand up for himself, and sometimes that got him into trouble. He picked up quite a few bans over the years for his actions on the pitch, including a famous brawl with Kevin Keegan. The physical battles weren't just limited to match days either. His fiery personality carried over off the field as well. One of the biggest controversies of his career came in 1975, when he was handed a lifetime ban from the Scottish national team after an alleged nightclub fight. It was a moment that could have defined his legacy for the wrong reasons. But despite all the trouble and controversy, Bremner was far more than just a tough guy. He was a true leader. His passion, determination, and never-give-up attitude made him the perfect captain for Don Revie's legendary Leeds United team of the late 60s and early 70s. Under his leadership, Leeds became one of the most dominant teams in English football history. But as they say, all great journeys must come to an end, and sadly, Bremner's was no exception. In December 1997, he was rushed to the hospital after falling seriously ill with pneumonia. Despite efforts to help him recover, he passed away at his home in the small village of Clifton, near Doncaster. It was suspected that a heart attack had ultimately taken his life. Just like that, football lost one of its fiercest competitors and most passionate leaders. His passing was a huge loss, not just for Leeds United fans, but for the football world as a whole. 4 days later, his funeral was held in the Yorkshire village of New Edlington. It was attended by many of his former teammates, coaches, and other footballing figures who had played alongside or against him. Though he may be gone, his unforgettable moments on the pitch continue to live on. His journey with Leeds United began on December 12, 1959, when he signed his first professional contract just after turning 17. A little over a month later, on January 23, 1960, he made his first team debut in a 3-1 win against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. He played as an outside right alongside Don Revie, and, despite poor weather conditions, he impressed the Yorkshire Evening Post with his intelligence, accuracy, and unselfish play. That season, Leeds sold regular outside right Chris Crowe to Blackburn Rovers, opening the door for Bremner to secure his place in the team. Leeds had a tough time in the second division during the 1960-61 season. They lost to future rivals Liverpool in the opening match, and Bremner found himself dropped from the squad. Frustrated, he met with manager Jack Taylor to express his disappointment, eventually regaining his place. But as the team struggled in the lower half of the table, Taylor resigned in March 1961, and Don Revie took over as player manager. Revie's appointment was a turning point, especially for young talents like Bremner. He focused on youth development, bringing in future club legends such as Paul Reaney, Peter Lorimer, Terry Cooper, Eddie Gray, and Paul Madeley. Despite an offer from Hibernian that would have allowed Bremner to return to Scotland, Revie refused to let him go. Leeds barely avoided relegation in the 1961-62 season, with Bremner finishing as joint top scorer alongside Jack Charlton with 12 goals. But changes were coming. Revie retired from playing and became Leeds' full-time manager, bringing in Bobby Collins from Everton, a move that would shape the club's gritty, determined identity for years to come. In the 1962-63 season, Revie started introducing more of the club's young players. Names like Norman Hunter and Paul Reaney made their debuts, and Leeds finished a respectable 5th in the second division. However, Bremner struggled with form and was dropped during a packed schedule caused by harsh winter conditions. Reevy decided to move him into central midfield, a decision that would prove to be a masterstroke. He also signed Johnny Giles from Manchester United, and together, Bremner and Giles formed one of the most formidable midfield partnerships in football history. With Bremner, Collins and Giles leading the way, Leeds secured promotion in the 1963-64 season as second division champions. However, their aggressive style of play earned them a bad reputation, with the Football Association labelling them the dirtiest team in the league. In the 1964-65 season, Leeds came heartbreakingly close to winning the first division title, but lost out to Manchester United on goal average. They also reached the FA Cup final, where Bremner scored in extra time, but Liverpool secured a 2-1 victory. The following year, he took over the captaincy after Bobby Collins suffered a serious injury. Leeds finished second in the league again in 1965-66, but Bremner's leadership was already proving crucial. Over the next few seasons, Leeds started winning trophies. In 1968, they won both the League Cup and their first European title, the Intercities Fairs Cup. The following year, they finally clinched the league title, finishing 6 points ahead of Liverpool. After securing the championship with a 0-0 draw at Anfield, Bremner and his teammates received a warm ovation from the Liverpool fans, who chanted, "Champions, champions, champions!" Success continued in 1969-70, starting with a Charity Shield victory over Manchester City. Leeds chased a historic treble that season, but fell short in all 3 competitions, losing the league to Everton, the European Cup semi-final to Celtic, and the FA Cup final to Chelsea in a brutal 2-game battle. Despite this, Bremner was named the FWA Footballer of the Year. In the following seasons, Leeds remained competitive, winning the Intercities Fairs Cup again in 1971 and lifting the FA Cup in 1972 after beating Arsenal in the final. However, they missed out on a league and cup double just 2 days later when they lost to Wolves, handing the league title to Derby County. In 1973, they reached 2 more finals, the FA Cup, where they were stunned by second division Sunderland, and the European Cup Winners' Cup, which they lost to AC Milan in a match marred by controversial refereeing decisions. Determined to reclaim their status as the best team in England, Leeds stormed through the 1973-74 season, winning their second league title under Bremner's captaincy. He was instrumental, scoring 11 goals in all competitions. At the end of the season, he was honoured with a testimonial match against Sunderland. However, change was in the air. Don Revie left to become England manager, and Leeds made the controversial decision to hire Brian Clough. Bremner, who had a strong bond with Revie, was not a fan of Clough's methods. Clough's tenure lasted just 44 days before he was replaced by Jimmy Armfield. That season, Leeds reached the European Cup final, but their dreams were crushed by Bayern Munich in a match filled with contentious referee decisions. Angry Leeds fans rioted in response. As Leeds' golden generation started to break up, Bremner remained, leading a transitional team under Armfield, but injuries and age started catching up with him, and by 1976 he was no longer the force he once was. That September, he left Leeds to join Hull City for £25,000. At Hull, he took on a leadership role, even captaining the side, but injuries continued to plague him. Hull struggled, and after failing to secure a managerial role at the club, Bremner announced he would retire when his contract expired in June 1978. His playing days ended in disappointment as Hull were relegated, finishing last in the second division. However, his managerial days did not disappoint. He took charge of 4th Division side Doncaster Rovers in November 1978, inheriting a struggling team. Though results were mixed, he kept the club in the Football League and introduced changes like massages and a revamped canteen. With no budget for signings, he relied on youth players and free transfers, guiding Doncaster to promotion in 1981. Life in the 3rd Division was tough. Despite early promise, Doncaster narrowly avoided relegation in 1982, but couldn't escape the drop the following season. Bremner rebuilt, securing promotion again in 1984, but financial struggles forced the club to sell key players, keeping them in mid-table. In 1985, Leeds United brought him in to restore their past glory. He reinstated old traditions but made bold squad changes. Leeds remained inconsistent, though they reached the 1987 FA Cup semi-finals and the playoff final. After failing to win promotion, Bremner was sacked in 1988. A year later, he returned to Doncaster, leading them to a solid Football League trophy run and early promotion hopes in 1990. But as his form collapsed, Bremner resigned in November 1991, ending his managerial career. And that wraps up today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an update.